Hi everyone, my name is Tiger. So today I'll be your tourist guide to bring you all around the historical sites of Penang. So before we start deeply into the historical sites of Penang, let me start with some brief introductions of location first. So, Penang is actually located in the country of Malaysia, and Malaysia is currently located in the Southeast Asia areas. So a lot of people ask why Penang is so important, because Penang be one of the very prominent ports, free ports, trading ports by the British here in Southeast Asia, and also is the first British port in Southeast Asia. The location of ours now is in the islands of Penang. So Penang is divided into two parts. We have the island part, which is where and also the mainland area, which is right behind you. If let's say you look there, you're able to see there is a container areas. That is actually our current Penang areas. So the port areas are referring to the mainland areas, and now we are on the island. So locations of where we are now is at the Esplanade of Penang. This Esplanade of Penang is a very important place here for Penang, because this is where all the historical history started here in Penang, right? So look, a lot of people when they come to Penang, the first question they always ask will always be, hey, you know, why Penang is known as Penang? So Penang is actually came from a Malay word. The Malay word known as Penang. Penang referring to betel nuts. So if let's say you do not know how betel nuts look like, look at that there, right? Look at that tree there. There is a very big one, look like a coconut tree, right? But that is not a coconut, right? That is actually a royal palm. So beside the very big tree that resemble like a coconut, there is a very thin one, right? This thin one, very thin, the leaf is way shorter, right? That is actually a betel nut tree. So this betel nut tree is where the name of Penang came from, and it was very important because in the old days, these islands of Penang, the whole islands of this Penang is filled with a lot of these betel nut tree, and a lot of these sailors, when they sail by this Southeast Asia, they will actually stop by the islands of Penang to collect the betel nuts in this area. So in the old day, betel nut was a very important kind of, you can consider it as a herbs, or some of it can also consider it as a spice. But me myself, I always consider it more on a herbs part, because it actually have some medical value on it. So back then, these betel nuts always chewed by the sailors, right? If let's say you know when the sailors, they sail on the sea, they don't have much entertainment. So what they always do is they need to make some entertainment by themselves. By chewing betel nut will give them that kind of instant ecstasy. This instant ecstasy will make them hyped up, right? That was very important because back then, as I mentioned, there is no entertainment. So these betel nuts become a very important kind of things that they chew to make themselves hype up, make themselves awake for the rest of the journey in the sea. So that time they sail on the sea is not matters of days and weeks, it's a matter of months and years. So they sail on the sea may take them years and sometimes decades before they can actually go back to their own country. So by having this kind of betel nuts, it helped them as well. So in the old day, these betel nuts, they also have a myth, right? A very myth. This myth is talking about these betel nuts. When you chew it, you actually help you to reduce, to increase your chances of surviving. So how to actually improve your chances of surviving? Today, it's actually proven that these betel nuts is no longer a myth, as I mentioned. Today, it's actually a truth. What is about that? It's about that time, a lot of the sailors on the sea, they always died because of diseases like scurvy, and also a lot of like the smallpox. These kind of diseases will kill them on the sea, and most of the time they die because of that, and not because of accidents, not because of somebody killed them. And by chewing these betel nuts have a medical property of disinfections. So it help you to actually help you to disinfect yourself against to this kind of diseases. So by chewing these betel nuts in the old day, it will actually improve your chances of surviving. Right? So today it's actually proven to be true, but no longer a myth. It used to be a myth because at the time there is no scientists to actually discover it. Today it's actually proven that they have so-called the disinfection property. So it have actually help you to disinfect yourself against this kind of diseases, right? So this betel nut, it become a very important thing. And the locations of the Penang Island, which is right at Southeast Asia, it make it into a very interesting point. So back then, a lot of the sailors, when they pass by Southeast Asia, they will come to Penang to collect these betel nuts here. And Penang at the time, we are very famous for two things. The first one is our betel nuts, as you can see here. The second one is actually our fresh water. So Penang is also where they replenish water. So Penang, another thing very from Penang is that we are island nations, right? Basically, we are now an island, but very rare that island nations in island states in the world, they have a lot of water. Most of the island states in the world, they have the problem with the water. Like our neighboring country, Singapore, they do not have water, right? They always they need to buy water from Malaysia, right? But Penang, we do not have this problem. Penang, we have plenty of waters here. So where our waters came from? Our waters came from the west side of the island, right? West of the islands, we have mountainous areas where we have water catchment areas to catch the water. So in Penang Island, in the northern part of the Penang Island, let's say look at the map, we have a very famous beach site today. We call it as Batu Feringhi. This Batu Feringhi, the word Feringhi, is actually came from they say that some of it say it's Portuguese word, some of it say it's Latin word. So some of it even say that it's a Persian word. It actually referring to foreigners, right? Foreigners. So this word of Batu Feringhi is actually referring to the stones of foreigners. Right? So back then, there are lots of sailors that sails into Penang. They will stop by that Batu Feringhi areas, and then they will go to the nearby waterfall. There is actually a waterfall there, known as the Chim Farm Waterfall. So they always went over there to collect fresh water before they go. So as time goes by, because of there is a lot of foreigners there, so the local people start to call that as the stones of foreigners, right? So over there at that Batu Feringhi area, you also will see a very big big piece of the rocks. At far you look at it, it resembles much like a shape of a heart. Right? Today we call that as a lover's owl. Back then this lover's owl was very important because it was an indicator, like a symbol. So when there's a sailor sails by, when they see this lover's owl, they know that this is the location where we can collect the fresh water. Right? So that is what Penang very famous for in the old day. We are very famous for our fresh water, and we are very famous for our betel nuts, right? So right behind us, let's say you can see here, this is a big piece of the sea. This sea is part of Straits of Malacca, and today we call this strait as the Penang Strait. And this Penang Strait has been divided into three portions. We have the North Channel, Medium Channel, and the South Channel. We're currently on the North Channel area, the northern part of the Penang Island, right? North Channel area. So this history of Penang, the actual starting point is at the years of 1786, right? Penang has been colonized by the British since after the years of 1786. But 10 years before the year 1786, at the years of 1776, there is a very important world history that happened on that day, right? And there is one of the most powerful country in the world today. They get independent on that day, and this most powerful nation in the world today have bring some impact to the founding of the islands of Penang. So basically, without the independence of this country, we will maybe most probably we may not have the islands of Penang that we see today, right? So take a wild guess, right? Which country that you think is that, right? Of course, I'm going to tell the answer. So the answer will be America, right? US is actually independence on the years of 1776, and the independence of US have actually bring some impacts on the founding of the islands of Penang. How it actually impact, right? So if let's say look back at the history of the American War, right? The independent war by the America. So that time at the years of 1776, we have this George Washington. He have defeated a British general. That British general name is known as Charles Cornwallis. So this Charles Cornwallis, after he lost the battle and US get independence, and he went back to England. And because of his, he lost the battle, the British government at the time have demoted him all the way into India as the governor in the British East India Company. So imagine you have a general of a big country, right, and you lose a battle, and then you get demoted all the way to a governor of a small company. Although they are still attached with the British government, but this British East India Company pretty much is a very small association of the British at the time. Consider the strength of it at the years of 1700. It's quite a small one. So this Charles Cornwallis, when he arrived at this British at India, he started to feel ashamed of himself, right? He started to feel that, hey, you know, how can be a big general of me lose a battle against George Washington? And he tried to do something to regain back his fame, so that he can actually go back to England and be proud again to become a general. So when he was at India, he's been looking at Southeast Asia for many years, because this Southeast Asia is where a lot of spices, right? Here we have a lot of spices, natural resources, and a very strategic areas. So they've been like looking at it, and for many years these British that time they've been buying a lot of these spices expensively from the Middle East trader, and also some of the Europeans that came to Southeast Asia before. So for them, they feel that no, it's time for them to come to Southeast Asia to expand their power, so that they can also start a foothold of their power into these Southeast Asian nations. And this Charles Cornwallis at the time, he feel that no, that is an appropriate time, because he want to do something to fame himself. So that come a time where he assigned a captain. This captain is known as Captain Francis Light, to come to Southeast Asia to search for a suitable network, a suitable place here in Southeast Asia to expand the British power, right? So this Captain Francis Light, finally he starts sailing after he get the instruction from Cornwallis, and when he starts sailing from the Indian Sea, because I'm from India, then go to the Indian Oceans, and this Indian Ocean is a rough sea. So basically there are lots of big waves and strong wind and all this. So it was very wavy, right? But he continued a journey, and then he went up north from Indian Ocean, went up north, and he entered Andaman Sea, right? Andaman Sea. So when he entered Andaman Sea, it's still quite a strong wind and still quite wavy, but it's slightly better, right? Slightly better compared to Indian Oceans. But when he entered from Andaman Sea down into Straits of Malacca, instantly he feel a lot of changes, because when he entered the Straits of Malacca, and Penang, because it's located at the northern part of Straits of Malacca, pretty much is one of the first few islands that he arrived. And when he passed by this island, he feel very strange, because when he look at the sea here, if let's say look at the sea right in front of us here, you'll find out that the sea here is very calm. There is no big wave, right? There is no big wave. Initially, this Captain Francis thought that this situation is maybe momentarily, because he thought that this is at the beginning of the year or end of the year or the mid of the year stuff. The rest of the time is still waiting. But they have been passing by these islands of Penang for many times, passing by Straits of Malacca many times. But every time when he passed by this area, he always see that this sea here, right, this part of the sea, it always very calm, right? So finally one day it caught his attention, because hey, how can be so calm, right, by the sea? And you find out that why? Because this part of the sea and this part of the Penang Island, we are a naturally protected island, right? On the west side of the island, if let's say look at the maps of the world, and on the west side of the islands of Penang, we are protected by the Sumatra of Indonesia. And on the east side of the Penang Island, we are protected by the Peninsula Malaysia. And in the middle of the Peninsula Malaysia, we have a mountain range, called that as a Titi Wangsa mountain range. So basically, that blow into these areas, it has been filtered through by these two major areas. And when you reach here, it becomes a mild one. So in Penang, we still have a lot of rains. We still have a lot of rains, so about 2,000 milliliters of rains a year. But pretty much, it's a very protected areas. I always say that Penang is a blessed area, because whenever we are too dry, we are running out of water, the God will actually give us some water. So when the rain is too heavy, you'll just close up the tap, right? So very special area, because we have enough resources of water to survive by ourselves. And water, until today, is also a very important resource. So that have caught the attention of the Captain Francis Light, that I feel that this island must be a very good island to expand the powers. Secondly, that time, he also looked at the islands, the strategic location of the island. Because this island, if let's say look across the side I mentioned, that is the mainland area of Penang. This mainland area of Penang and with the islands of Penang, we are separated, right, by these sea areas. It used to be called as the Straits of Malacca. Today we call that as Penang Strait, as I mentioned. So this Penang Strait, the North Channel area of Penang Strait, is a very narrow strait. Very narrow. If they say look across, it's very near. We are very narrow, and this narrow strait very good for defense system. Basically, they just need to build a fort, which is later on the Fort Cornwallis. So if let's say you are the enemy, when you're entering this part of the sea, you will be automatically squeezed down, right? Squeezed down by the strait, and by a narrow strait, it's actually very easy for them to defend against. So if let's say the enemy, you come in, you're automatically squeezed down, there is no way for you to run, right? So basically, that will be very strategic areas. So because of these two main reasons at the time, this Captain Francis Light feel that must be a strategic place. And then without much of the doubt, he actually went back to India and reported this to Charles Cornwallis. Although initially it get rejected by the Charles Cornwallis, but this Captain Francis Light still pretty much insists on to take down this island. And without the approval at the time from this Charles Cornwallis, Captain Francis Light actually came over here. And he negotiated a deal with the King of Kedah, because initially these islands of Penang, we are not an independent island by itself. We actually belong to the states of Kedah. The states of Kedah is actually today our neighboring state of Penang state. So this Penang island used to be part of them. And this Captain Francis Light, when he came over here by himself, he had negotiated a deal with this King of Kedah. He told the King of Kedah that he's going to give them the protections from any foreign invaders, right? And he will give them as well 6,000 Spanish dollars a year, right, to lease over this particular island. And the time this King of Kedah, without much of the doubt, right, he feel that this is a very good deal. Of course, it's a very good deal. You're going to get 6,000 and get protections from the British. And because the time Kedah as well, they are under a very, very strong attack by Siam, which is current Thailand, so, and also Burma, which is current Myanmar. So they've always been attacked by these two strong powers, Southeast Asian nations. So this Kedah, of course, he want to get some protections. And this island of Penang, because they was too far away from the administrative centers of Kedah, so this island has been here for many years without much of the interruptions and administrations. And this island back then is actually a very wild island. There are no people who are taking care of this island, and there are lots of pirates who are staying here. So by the British who came here to administrate on behalf of Kedah, the King of Kedah felt that this is a very good opportunity, right? Why not, right? Since it's like a useless island for them, they feel that time. So without much of the consideration, they actually signed on with the deal with this with this Captain Francis Light, without noticing that that contract is actually signed between him, right, and the King, and also Captain Francis Light himself, not with the British East India Company. So there's a conflict raised later on because of the misunderstanding of the contract, and that leads to more wars that coming out later on. Later I'll tell you more about that, right? So this Penang Island, this is the basic introductions and where we are now. Later on we'll be bringing you away from these areas. We're going to another next areas to tell you more about some other very important person here in Penang, right?